Hello, and welcome to Nonprofit411, the podcast for nonprofit professionals who are passionate about helping and still trying to figure out the rest. Each episode brings in experts who've worked in the sector, fundraisers, directors, and specialists for real conversations and real help you can use in your own work. I'm Sarah Barton, the Generosity Strategist, and I'm joined today by Tim Sarrantonio from the Generosity Spectrum. Welcome.
We love our generosity here, so I'm excited to dive in.
Yes. I love that you started with that because I just hate the word fundraising. So I want to change that. I want to change that in the entire sector. Let's start with generosity.
Let's start with generosity. You know, it's interesting because I've worked with and for technology companies for a while, and I even had an executive at my last job. They were on the finance side, and they would always they're like, who uses the word generosity? I thought it's about donations. And I'm like, okay, that's reducing things down to the way that you manage the resources versus the underlying reason for something existing. It's kind of talking about a city charter and why a community even has established itself, and then getting annoyed that we're only talking about the sewage system, right? It's you got to go much beyond that. It's the money's only one component. So generosity is so much bigger than that.
It is. And so you are really trying to bring that to awareness through the generosity spectrum in all the work that you're doing. In fact, I feel like the first time that I really started using that word really consistently was after you and I started talking about the generosity economy and the generosity ecosystem.
Yeah. So for folks who may not be familiar with my work, here's a little too long didn't read. I've been in the sector since 2008. I would say technically 6 if we're going to extend my grad school internships. For a nonprofit, I did teach kids English, not the best, right? At that, right? But I did love teaching. That kind of was where my love of education started, was just working with these kids. I was going to Teachers College, Columbia. And eventually I was like, well, look, I love teaching and I'm going to be an academic. So I'm going to go out west a little bit, not too far out west. I went to Chicago, folks. And so I was living in New York, went to Chicago. My best friend was there. And I was like, well, I'm going to wear a tweed jacket and I'm going to, have a pipe, and I will be in the middle of a cornfield. So I need to go to the Midwest. And ultimately, that dream of being a professor did not work out. And I joined the nonprofit sector in 2008. And just like many of you, and Sarah, I'd actually love to maybe know how you got into the sector too. Because for me, I just stumbled into it. My dad flew out and was like, you need a job. Your student loans are not going to get paid for by the crappy coffee shops that you're jumping around to. It's time to get serious. And so the first job I got was as a grant writer. But the entire budget for the organization was $100,000, not even $98,000, I think, if we look. And I didn't know what I was doing. I was a failed academic, and I was a grant writer in 2008, Sarah. So I think a lot of people have that feeling. So yeah, I'll kind of continue on. But what about you? I'm actually interested. I'm going to flip it on you. I know it's your podcast, but it's me. So I want to hear. Yeah. How did you get into the sector? What was your first job?
So actually, I went to my undergrad is in child development and family studies. And so my first internship, I knew I didn't want to do early childhood. I had actually planned on going into the medical field and working there. But my first internship was with the Family Resource Network in West Virginia. So they provide all the resources. After that job, I was planning on going into a dual degree in social work and public administration, again, so that I could get back into the hospitals and do therapy with kids. That's where I wanted to be. But the social work department was really difficult to work with. And I had a paid internship at a Chamber of Commerce, which is a nonprofit, from a grant written by a guy at a hospital that was also a nonprofit. And he's like, Sarah, you can do this for the rest of your life. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. So I did a 3-day grant writing class with this guy and got hired as a grant writer at a university.
And that's
So,
such an amazing story. And it's really emblematic, I think, of the overall obstacle that I'm trying to help people is that many of us joining the sector feel like it's like we got dumped on the island of misfit toys and we're not exactly sure how we got there, especially on the fundraising side. But this happens in programming, volunteer management, administrative, finance, all of these different things. And I think that's the biggest thing that I want to flag is that we silo our experiences. And yet, Sarah, what you just talked about is very emblematic of how a lot of people fall into the sector. They might even be exposed through the social work side, and then they kind of shift over into the more resource management side of things, or even vice versa. But we're all experiencing the same thing in the same flow in the format. And so how do we learn together? And so, I had a 20-year career in nonprofits, in technology, seeing data systems at large scale. But the practical reality is that most generosity, if you look at the data, if you look at the philanthropic psychology behind it, if you look at the socioeconomic realities of resource distribution, that is not just on racial lines, but class lines, gender lines, ability. All of these point to the strongest driver of resilience in a community is people who understand themselves and the ways that they are generous with each other. And that is actually what I'm trying to teach. But I'm starting with executive directors and board members and fundraising staff and event planners who are like, I have terrible meetings. I need to cut this down. So I actually designed something that we'll talk about, I imagine, to kind of address that. Yeah. But the bigger vision is education. We typically come in and we have no clue what we're doing. Sometimes we work at a university that's going to help support us. I didn't get proper professional development outside of like webinars by Constant Contact, right? In terms of how to do email, or maybe I went to something that Foundation put on, but I didn't go to my first conference until I worked for a Catholic school that the very first week I was there, I received a check to process as my database administrator job outline. That was the equivalent of 1/10 of my first nonprofit's entire budget, not salary,
budget,
but budget. Right. And so it really opened my eyes after even just a few years on the realities of professional development. And that's ultimately my passion, is that it's always been education.
Yeah. So like so much in that I want to like just kind of speak to and kind of unpack. I agree that, the education is sparse. And so in my work, the Generosity Engine, I help people understand the system of fundraising, right? Like this is like, if, it's more than just asking for money. And what you said about you got trained on the free webinars or maybe the low cost webinars. Yeah, none of those actually help you create a whole system. Like It doesn't create the processes needed to actually run fundraising, for example, really, really well. And I did finish my degree in public administration, which I believe is probably one of the closest. There are a couple of colleges now providing like a nonprofit training. I know David Rhodes, I had him on the show, last year or the year before, and he works at a university that offers a nonprofit training. But I feel like public administration has kind of been, for a long time, like that was where you could go if you were not doing business. So, you have your MBA and then you have your MPA, and there's really nothing in between. So I did the MPA.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you the gaps when we looked at budgeting, we looked at different styles of budgeting that nonprofits could do. And we helped our project was like working on a city's budget.
Yeah.
But that's so different than a nonprofit, right?
It
because
is.
Because in a nonprofit, you have unpredictable income.
Mm-hmm.
And you have the ability to like increase the income, but you have to estimate and budget for all circumstances.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of the core underlying, like, first of all, I had a moment There's this show on Apple TV called Dark Matter, and it's about basically multiverses. Every decision that we make could lead to another branch of possibilities. And that is the practical reality in all of our lives. We live one timeline, so to speak. It's not that I'm hopping over to different things, but I have critical junctures, big and small, in my life that could lead to one path or another. And that happens to all of us. And so I could have went to the MPA program in Syracuse, for instance. I got accepted to that program. Instead, I decided I want to live in Ireland for a year, and then I want to go to an Ivy League school, partially because my mom said I couldn't get in. And so that's not how most people should make their career decisions, is spiting their parents and going into debt for it. The practical reality
that's
is
the piece that'll get you.
Yeah. Well, and it worked out. Look, for me, things worked out in a way that I am in a unique spot because I am chair of the Fundraising Effectiveness Project currently. I've been involved in that for about 10 years. I'm on the Aspen Institute's Alliance for Social Trust work group on bottom-up trust. And so even when you're talking about healthcare and things like that, where I think we need to shift to regain our identity as a sector is to re-embrace practice-based evidence, meaning we're going to test, we're going to try, we're going to see where systems can take us because systems are living things. An ecosystem, right? That's honestly what the generosity economy is an ecosystem of both resources financially and mental. It is the attention economy brought high because, as Jen Shang and Adrian Sargent have established in their work on philanthropic psychology at the Institute for Sustainable Philanthropy, the strongest reason people are generous is because it resonates with their identity. And everybody's identity is a multiverse of weird emotions and history and trauma and all of these, and beauty and like art and culture. It's all of it. And every time we walk outside, there is an opportunity to be pitched at or to experience something. That's the difference between, what we do in the nonprofit sector by default versus what's happening in e-commerce on an everyday basis. People who tell me that giving is the same as buying something on Amazon do not understand the underlying psychology on why people give. It's not donate bucks. And this is the problem with a lot of the education now, is that it is equating market dynamics and sales tactics as the equivalent of building a long-term or even short-term relationship with somebody. Sure. And I'll get off my rant soapbox in a moment, but the practical reality is that there are some cool things, and I've learned this because of the launch that I just came out of. I got to use Shopify. There's some wild things that the e-commerce platforms can teach us from how to keep people's attention.
Yeah.
But that is not the same as an underlying heartbeat. And so what I'm so excited about for what I'm building with an educational gaming system is to be able to take that and use it almost as a GPS for generosity to help a team kind of understand where's the ultimate place that I should be focusing my energy on. And then to connect that into a system like you're designing for practical application, there's like a difference between I'm being creative and I'm in a sandbox. That's my world versus, but we have to actually go do a thing. That's a much longer conversation, but I think we need both. I think we're getting so bogged down by how do I get things started that my world that I'm trying to inject is a bit of color and fun to go, we're going to get it started by not freaking out immediately. We're going to get it started by learning from each other. Yeah. That's a thing that we're missing is we don't have that peer network other than you joining a professional association or going to see your buddies on a Zoom call or something like that. There's no mycelium in the ecosystem, and that's kind of what I want to have.
Well, yeah. I think the problem with the types of systems that we do have to have those is they're not super safe when things aren't going right.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's what I love. So we're going to have to introduce everybody to kind of, the Generosity Roundtable. But I think that's what I love about the way that you're going about it.
Yeah. Yeah, because we're talking very theoretical,
we can have
folks, at this point.
conversations.
We're 15 minutes in, and I want to make sure you all understand the journey that we're going towards. So we're going to do a bit of telling, but there is some show elements that we can talk about too, Sarah. So, I think we've established the problem, and so keep going, because the safety part is really critical to what we're talking about. I'm happy that you're grabbing that thread.
Yeah, because I think it's one of the pieces that's missing for the nonprofit sector. So, and it's not such an issue in business because it's less of a trust-based exchange. I'm trying to think of the right word, right? It's less of a trust-based exchange in business, but we operate in a trust-based environment. And so because of that, I think that there's a lot of feeling that I can't, in the testing world, I can't get it wrong, because if I'm banking on you trusting me and you see me failing, then you're going to lose trust in me. And so we have a lot of spaces where we can show up, but we don't have spaces where we can show up and be like, this didn't work. Can you guys give me like some feedback? I was just listening to Simon Sinek's.
Go on, sorry.
His bit of optimism, and it was on feedback. And like feedback is a data point that is really vital for us as we adjust, right? We need feedback. Feedback's not bad. It is just data points. And I think like that's where we struggle in the sector, when the data points aren't an overwhelming success. We feel like they're not data points that can be shared. And so it's because
we're going to lose
challenge.
our job because we didn't hit the numbers that even when I was at the Bridge conference recently during my launch week last, it was in late July. And so Generosity Spectrum is a company that it's the nonprofit sector's first dedicated educational gaming studio just for the sector. There's other places that produce games. There's other nonprofits that have been doing, game elements for a long time now, but I have not seen anybody who's focused their energy on fundraisers, executive directors, board members, volunteer managers, program designers, in-house finance teams, the inventory management at the food bank, right? Like all of it, the donors, the community at large, the program participants. In short, everybody, but from the basis of this is a special way to think about the world when we're in the nonprofit sector. And so that space is ultimately where I wanted to say, look, I want to create this space. And at first, Sarah, I could have been a consultant. I could have gone and said, I have this way to think about the world. And if you buy my framework, that's it. Right? Like, that's not how I want to do. And I think that there's great people like you that want to work alongside folks. I'm just going to be honest. I don't have the patience. Right? I got 3 young kids. I'm teaching them. Right? And so for me, I've been so used to teaching thousands of people through virtual education and workshops and things like that I also said, what does it look like if I can teach people to do this themselves? Right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
That's the main thing, is that it's not the consultancy. It's the fact that people have to leave and go back and do their lives. And I'm getting sick of the workshops, the trainings, the curriculum, the conferences, the webinars, the templates, the downloadable sheets, the apps that are being created with AI so you can enter your own benchmarks on the fly. All of these things aren't working by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't know where we're supposed to go next once the thing ends. And so that safety zone is what I'm obsessed with. And very early on in my journey, about last July is when I said, okay, I need something different to do. And I talked with 2 people very close to me in upstate New York that work for nonprofits. And they're like, all of this sounds great, but if it's like above $500, we have to go talk to somebody. Yeah. And I was like, okay, what could that look like? Like, what is education that is replicable, that could travel, that could adapt, look like for under $500 or below? And that's kind of became my obsession. And that's where I settled on, you know what? We don't have games. We don't have a game just for us. I've been playing with games for years. I've been doing bingo. I've been doing Jeopardy. I've been doing card games. I've been testing this stuff out for years. It turns out I've been actually developing this for probably 4 years without me realizing it. And the engagement was always a lot higher. People would recall things at a much higher rate. There's a lot of research that shows that. But to the piece that gets to what you're talking about, why role playing? Because ultimately, I felt we need a bit of a role play experience here. It's not Dungeons and Dragons outright, folks, but there's a little bit of that there. And it's because of the distance that the moment we start to talk about work, people get defensive. They go, but I didn't do that. It's like me talking to my kids. Who left the garbage in the playroom? Wasn't me. Wasn't me. Because they think they're going to get in trouble. And, you know, because they did a thing wrong. And first of all, that you got to create an environment where they're not just pointing fingers at each other like Spider-Man. And that's where that community of peers is ultimately the thing that I'm so excited about, because we're going to be able to play this thing that walks you through scenarios and helps you think about problems in the world that you're experiencing as a nonprofit leader or board member or community member, and do it in a safe way. But the biggest part is you get to do it with people like you and me, Sarah, and other people who are working at nonprofits or other people who are thinking about the same problems. That's what I'm most excited about. It's not the actual game itself, because the game's going to evolve and I might even come up with other ideas. But the peer learning, where we get to share in a space where it's like, I didn't screw up or I did screw up, and this is like, okay, that's what I'm most excited about. Thanks for letting me soapbox. That's kind of the whole gist.
So I have my Generosity Roundtable game. I got a advanced copy, and I haven't played a full game yet. However, I have one scheduled August 11th. So today's August 7th for people who are listening. You know, I have it scheduled in a couple days, but we were prepping for it and we were going through like the different scenarios we could talk about. And I'm doing it at a local, we have an organization nearby us called Nonprofits Lead, and she helps nonprofits build capacity. And so we were talking through it, and she's like, oh, I love this because I could play as my friend who has this personality, or I could secretly just play as my organization who needs this thing, right?
Bingo, bingo, bingo. Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. So the role-playing piece is so nice because you could have conversations without having that direct, you know, responsibility for what the situation was. And the other thing we really loved about it is that you can play as a role outside of yourself or outside of anybody represented at your organization. And that helps bring in dynamic thinking in a new way, right? Because we know people in our lives who think differently. We don't naturally think like them, but we can pretend to be them and think about, you know, well, and you know, I think about in my own life, my kids will always say, well, mom will say, you know, they know what we're going to say, or they might know our point of view, and they bring it into the conversation without having to have in the examples, you know, without mom being present.
Well, I think that's a great point too. And I'm excited about your game, and I'll give you a few tips here that also help other people, because this is typically how it's going to flow, right? You need at least 3 people usually to have a round table conversation, because it's a conversation game. And so you got your friend and maybe one other person joining you, or are you just going to do it with her? Like, what are you going to do?
Yeah, so it's actually at a meeting where nonprofits come and we just like share. And so there's usually about 11 nonprofits represented. So we're definitely going to have a decent game. I would say. So
you can either deputize, you know, your friend, or have a full table-wide conversation. You could do it up to like 10 people and a host. So that works. And everyone's going to take on either a character. And it could be as simple, Sarah, as like somebody reading the cards and being like, I'd like to be the builder, because it's rooted in philanthropic psychology. It's like why people think about generosity. So there's no jerks, right? There's nobody trying to like secretly undercut the goal. Like, I tried to introduce that early on in play testing. I've been doing this since December 2025 with over 300 people at this point. And introducing jerks ruin the game. It's like it's a consensus game where, how do you win? That was one of the first things that people ask. How do you win? You win by agreeing with each other. And so, but people need more there. So basically, you say, I'm going to be this character. And then there's going to be a few other people that are going to do that. You could play as yourself. You could play as your board member, like you said, or a friend, or a donor that you want to pretend that you are. It doesn't really matter. What people also do in that mixed setting is they might make a fake nonprofit too. It's like, this is a composite nonprofit. I built a little generator even where it's like, we all work for this animal organization. And we're going to pretend that, like, I'm a donor and I'm a board member and I'm this, and we're going to talk about this problem. The reason we're in this room is we've been gathered here by, Trailhead Animal Service Nonprofit, which is what I did at Bridge Conference. And we had like few tables running, so you can even break up the groups too. Because all you need is somebody to go, we're going to talk about this thing, and we're going to have this type of conversation about it, right? So I want to talk about donor retention being a problem, and I want to align on like why that's a problem. And then you just have a few cards that you say, you all have to choose one of these cards. That's what makes it not a board meeting, right? Like, the difference is that they should be somewhat having an argument about, like, philosophically, do we want to go fast or slow? That's it. That's the game. Is like, put two opposing types of approaches to a problem in front of people and get them to talk it out. That's it. Afterwards, Sarah, you are just facilitating a good conversation. And the cards focus that and make it that it's not an awful board meeting or an interesting board meeting that then leads to like, it's like, no, we're going to take 20, 30 minutes and just kind of talk it out on why we think this is the way to solve this particular scenario. Then do with it what you will. You could go out of it and you say, let's learn. What did we learn? Well, how does this apply to our real work? If I was going to work with donors, what would we do with this information? It sky's the limit at that point.
Yeah, that's what I love about it. So, like, in the game, there are some pre-made scenarios, but then as, I was talking about with my friend, we're like, oh my gosh, when you like to have a conversation about, and, we have all kinds of ideas that we know because we deal with nonprofits all the time who have these challenges. And a lot of times with the people that I work with, particularly when it comes to fundraising, they're like, well, this is really like aligned with my community, but then when it gets into the boardroom, it completely dissolves. And so I think that it allows us to prep better. We can use it as a prepping tool so that we're going to be stronger prepared. And I was watching something on AI the other day that said, AI is an averaging software. And so like what it gives you is going to be somewhere in the middle. But sometimes in these situations, that's not where you need to end up. You maybe need to have a strong stance, and you're going to have to be ready to defend it. And so like AI can't do that. The dynamics of humans are still greater than any AI. And so, it's so simple. You can grab 3 or 4 people, and this allows you to create a much more dynamic outcome in a very short period of time. And you walk away from it thinking, right? You walk away from it thinking like, oh, and the next time you encounter anything, you're like, oh yeah, I got to remember, I'll write that down in my notebook. Like, I got to remember to look at it from this perspective. I'm a solopreneur, so I actually have some of the same challenges in that, like, I don't have a lot of that feedback, and this is a great way to get feedback.
I love it. I mean, you get the heart. You get the heart, and that's where it's going to grow. And really, the goal is that, Sarah, as you go through your first game, my job is to make you feel comfortable, is to make you feel confident you can run it on your own, right? I can't be everywhere. And so the point is that people like you as a host, because we have a growing host network, as you learn different techniques, as you learn things, we're going to share that back out so other hosts can benefit from that too and go, ooh, I talked about it this way, or I did that. And that's why I did the scenario generator. So I'm going to tip my hat to you for pushing me I want to get that done like for this call, basically, because I was like, I want to
Yeah.
have this ready where literally, Sarah, like you plug in. I don't know if you played around with it yet, but it's like,
I
here's the
did.
table.
I
Yeah.
printed mine yesterday for my upcoming, because I do it next Tuesday, right?
Okay.
So I was like,
Yeah.
oh
So
my
how
gosh,
did
this
it
is
look?
great.
Like, did it like help personalize it too? Like, I think it's a pretty nifty output.
It did. It really did help. So like that was one of my challenges in hosting my first game. You know, there's a couple of different card options under communication, and I wasn't sure, you know, which ones would be the best fit. So I went in and I put the scenario, the technology scenario, and that's the one that we're going to do. We had talked about doing an AI one, and I thought there was an AI card, and then I couldn't find
There's
it.
some
So like
AI
I must have
related
been in the
cards, but here's the
yeah.
beauty. You'll be able to write your own. Like that stuff down the line, it's like there's a reason I gave you a blank card. So if we want to add AI
Yeah.
things or you know things specific to different types of situations, like that's the cool part about the game is it's going to extend. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think AI, so we did the tech problem, which is you're paying for a software and like,
Yep.
you know, do you need that much software if people aren't going to use it, or do you need to make people use it because you have that software
And
and
you
we
could
need to
put
use it
AI
well,
under
which,
that for there, but it might need its
yeah.
own card
Yeah.
eventually.
I definitely think it does, because I work with
Mm.
so many organizations, and AI is an extender, right? It doesn't replace what we can do, but it does extend what we do into so many new facets that we wouldn't be able to do otherwise.
Well,
And so,
you know what? How we can develop those new resources is people participating in the growth of the network. As a peer learning network, we're going to have free resources, free games, right? Sarah's going to run her own stuff. I'm going to ask people to even be like, hey, do you want to host your own open gameplay, like in your own community? We're going to have virtual things, but we're going to grow the network by either people donating, right? So people could, I've had patrons sponsor boxes for people in different communities, which I think is so cool. My chiropractor, right? An investment banker, like these are people who are not on the radar of the typical generosity prospect list. And then we have these public openings where I allow people to buy the game directly too. And no matter what, it's $500. That's it, right? That we're going back to that 500 number. Because Sarah, here's the fascinating thing, because I have taken on zero private equity. I've taken on zero outside debt. I don't have a loan with a bank. This is all basically bootstrapped through donations, and because I have a fiscal sponsor. So every time people donate, it goes to a Black-led nonprofit up in upstate New York. Called the Connect Center. And so that they help with the administration, the compliance. I use the space for trainings and stuff like that. But we'll also do virtual things, you know, for free. But 500 is the average donation too. And so we've had people, consultants, we've had nonprofits, we've had individuals step up. I have guardians like you to help advise me on where to go. You've already helped make things better. And so that's the whole point. That's the whole point. I love it. So we're aiming for our next public opening in September, the week of September 15th, I believe, through the 19th. And I'm going to try to have some public gameplay, and then everybody's going to be invited to do some stuff for the Nonprofit Social Media Summit in November, as well as Giving Tuesday. And then we'll just learn together. So I can't wait to keep learning with you, Sarah.
That's awesome. Well, thank you. Yes, thank you. I can't believe like that conversation went way too fast.
Yeah.
Tim, can you let everybody know where they can find you and where they can find the Generosity Roundtable information?
Yeah, so generosityspectrum.org is the company page, and right now it's focused entirely on the Generosity Roundtable world. Doesn't mean I won't, have other things in the future, but right now it's all about the Generosity Roundtable as kind of our heart. So generosityspectrum.org has all the resources, all the games. You could find more of the experts network, people besides Sarah. We have about 40 experts that are guiding us. And then also, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn and YouTube. My YouTube presence is growing. I also now have a puppet that I use.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, Mitt the puppet. People want Mitt. So there's a puppet that basically my kids voice and control, and they use it to like raise objections with the entire process and things. And so I'm going to keep kind of like, imagine those guys at the Muppets, they're yelling at the people on the stage, right? That's I have my own version of that.
Yes.
Got to keep me grounded.
I love it. And I love that your kids are the voice of it. So
yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on Nonprofit411. I am a huge cheerleader. I want this to be a success. I'm going to be using it in my work. I'm going to be taking it around the state of West Virginia and maybe
Love
beyond. If I have opportunity to take it beyond, I will absolutely do that. This is a tool every nonprofit can benefit having because it makes hard conversations easier and it gives us direction that we wouldn't have otherwise. So
and it's that bigger peer network, right? It's not just the box, right? It's that ongoing learning, right? It's a one-time thing. There's no subscription. There's no subscription. It's just like you get it and let's learn together. And so, Sarah, I thank you so much for the support. You've been such a rock, and I can't wait to get down to where you are and we could play some games.
Yeah, we need to. We need to bring New York to West Virginia. So
there you go. There you go.
All right. Thanks, Tim. And we will see you next week. Thanks for listening. Bye.